For our next lesson, we're going to talk about the distance on the plane, specifically the distance from the origin. Now, to introduce this, I want you to imagine Albert, Bernadette, Cyrus, and Olivia are all on a Cartesian plane as such. Olivia is at the origin. O stands for Olivia. Albert is at the point 3, 4. Bernadette is at the point -2, 5. And Cyrus is at the point -6, -1. Okay? Well, what we have to do is determine which one is closest to Olivia. So we have to figure out these distances. How far is Albert from Olivia? How far is Bernadette from Olivia? How far is Cyrus from Olivia? Alright, well, let's think about this using the Pythagorean Theorem. If I wanted to think about how far Albert was away, I could think of this as a right-angled triangle. This is 3 squares long, right here. 1, 2, 3. And this is 4 squares long. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's a right-angled triangle. So dA squared will equal 3 squared plus 4 squared. dA squared equals 3 squared plus 4 squared. Well, that means dA is the square root of 3 squared plus 4 squared. That means it's the square root of 9 plus 16, which is root 25, which is 5. So that would tell us that Albert was 5 units away from Olivia. Now we go to the next one. Let's talk about Bernadette. Again, we'll use the Pythagorean Theorem. This is 2 units, and this is 5 units. Okay, the distance is 2 and the distance is 5. So dB squared is going to equal 2 squared plus 5 squared. So dB squared equals 2 squared plus 5 squared. But I want you just for a moment to think, instead of putting 2, we could put -2. Because -2 times -2 is the same as 2 times 2. So instead of calling it +2 squared and thinking of it as a length or a distance, we can call it -2 as a quantity squared, which equals the same thing, and therefore think of it as simply plugging in the value of the coordinate. So let's call it -2, because I think you'd agree -2 times -2 is the same as 2 times 2, which means I'm going to think of the distance squared as -2 quantity squared plus 5 squared, which means the distance is the square root of -2 quantity squared plus 5 squared. Well, -2 times -2 is 4. 5 times 5 is 25. So the distance is the square root of 29. Okay? Similarly, let's see if we can figure out the distance of Cyrus from Olivia. Well, we see Cyrus is way over here. Well, we can think of this as a right-angled triangle where this is 6 units long and this is 1 unit long, and this red line is the hypotenuse. So DC, quantity squared, will equal 6 squared plus 1 squared. DC, quantity squared, equals 6 squared plus 1 squared. Now, I think you'd agree, though, that 6 times 6 is the same as -6 times -6. So what we're going to do is plug in a -6 instead of a 6, because that's the coordinate. And I think you'd agree also that instead of using 1 times 1, since the y-coordinate is -1, we could use -1 times -1. They would equal the same thing. And so now when we go to take the square root, we can take the square root of -6 times -6 plus -1 times -1. Well, -6 times -6 is 36, -1 times -1 is 1, and what we get is that the distance of Cyrus from Olivia is root 37. And so what we see is that the closest person to Cyrus is Albert. But perhaps more importantly, what we also see is the following formula. The distance of any point to the origin is equal to the square root of x squared plus y squared. And what we established earlier is we can even plug in a negative value for x, because when we square it, it'll become positive anyway. Or we could plug in a negative value for y, because when we square it, it'll become positive anyway. And so this is a formula that we're going to know very well. The distance of any point to the origin is always equal to the square root of x squared plus y squared. Okay? Well, we're going to put that to good use now in some other questions. What we're going to do here is figure out the distance from the origin to the point -4, 6. We're going to simplify the response if possible. Then we're going to state the answer rounded to 1 decimal place. So the distance of -4, 6 to the origin is the square root of -4 quantity squared plus 6 quantity squared. Okay, just like we said a minute ago, it's always going to equal the square root of x squared plus y squared. The square root of x squared plus y squared. Well, -4 times -4 is 16. 6 times 6 is 36. 16 plus 36 is 52. So we have the square root of 52. Now the question wanted us to simplify that. Well, 52 is the same as 4 times 13, and 4 is the same as 2 times 2. So really 52 is like 2 times 2 times 13. So root 52 is like root 2 times 2 times 13. Well, we've got two factors of 2 on the inside, so let's put one factor of 2 on the outside. This 13 is alone on the inside, so we leave it alone on the inside. And so simplified, we can say the distance of the point -4, 6 to the origin is 2 root 13. But if we wanted to approximate it, and that's what that symbol means there, we would say it's approximately equal to 7.2. Okay, next we have an airplane that is an airplane control tower, which is located at the origin. And it locates two airplanes on its radar screen. One of them, plane A, is -815 on the Cartesian plane, and another one, plane B, is -9, -12. We want to know which one should be instructed to land first. And so using common sense, we'll assume that the planes are going at the same speed. We want to tell the closer one to land first. Okay? So we're going to figure out the distance of this point to the origin and the distance of that point to the origin. Well, distance is the square root of x squared plus y squared. -8 times -8 is 64, and 15 times 15 is 25. So we get root 64 plus 225, which is root 289, which is 17. So the first airplane is 17 units away. The second one, though, is the distance is the square root of x squared plus y squared. -9 times -9 is 81. -12 times -12 is 144. Evaluating this gives us 225 under the square root sign, which is 15. That means plane B is closer, so it should be instructed to land first. Plane B should be instructed to land first. Okay. Now, we'll get to our next question. A triangle has vertices at 0, 0, -6, 8, and -15, 8. Well, what the question asks us to do is sketch the triangle and determine the perimeter of the triangle. Well, there's my professional sketch of the triangle. We've got -15, 8, -6, 8, and 0, 0. Okay? Well, we want to get the perimeter, which means we need the length of this side, the length of this side, and the length of that side. Okay? So, let's figure out the distance from O to A first. The distance from O to A, from the origin to the point -6, 8, is the square root of -6 quantity squared plus 8 squared, which is 36 plus 64, which is 100 under the square root. Root 100 is 10. So this is 10 units. The next one we're going to figure out is from O to B. Well, the distance from O to B will be the square root of x squared plus y squared. X is -15. When you square that entire quantity, you get positive 225. Y is 8. When you square that, you get 64. Adding these together gives us 289, but we're still under the square root. Root 289 is 17. So the distance from O to B is 17. So that side length is 17. Now we want to know this. We want to know this next side length. And that side length is really easy. We actually just count squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9 units long. Now, you could think of it algebraically, though, just by common sense. The distance from negative 6, 8 to negative 15, 8 is 9 units. Okay? But anyways, you get this as your diagram now of your triangle. So what does the perimeter equal? The perimeter is equal to 10 plus 17 plus 9, which is 36. 10 plus 17 plus 9 is 36. So the perimeter of the triangle is 36.